Hi, I'm Nomalanga Mhlauli-Moses with Healthy Black Woman, and this is my good friend Shaquita Graham with lovingtheblackman.com and atechco.com. How are you doing today, Shaquita?
I'm doing great, Noma. How are you doing?
Oh, I have no complaints. My disclaimer or disclosure or whatever you want to call it today is that I have a newborn next to me. So we have to pretend if we hear noises that we don't hear them.
Right.
But this is all about, not making excuses and doing what we do in spite of everything. So let's jump into our first topic. I'm just looking at my notes here. About Ciara being called a hoe. Now, you and I had a brief discussion about this topic. Can you tell us a little bit more about it?
Okay, so as a lot of people know, Ciara was proposed to by, I think he's Seattle Seahawks quarterback Russell Wilson, and a lot of people came out. There was an article, actually a tweet that came out and said some things about how black men are lowering their standards by choosing someone like Ciara, who has had so many relationships. She does have a child by a former boyfriend, I think. His name is Future. I don't think they were married. And how Russell Wilson is doing himself a disservice by being involved with her. And a lot of people kind of contrast that whole image with Ayesha Curry, who comes from a whole different perspective as far as how she portrays herself in the public and how her image is perceived.
Right. Now I have the I guess it was a tweet or a maybe Instagram. I can't tell what platform it came from.
No, it was, yeah.
Or a whole Facebook post. Is that what it was?
I think it was Facebook post.
Okay, so he says, I remember when I was in college or high school, these so-called educated girls were refusing to date smart guys called squares because they were too nice or too much of a square. It wasn't cool to date a square. So instead, they would choose to be ran through by all of the ball players, goons, rappers, thugs, dope dealers, etc. Then, after being ran through till around the age of 28 to 30, they would try to find a nice corporate square, again, nice corporate square, and were usually successful. This is how the game is ran. So to all of my young, educated, successful brothers out there, do not settle for hood leftovers. No second chances, especially hood and ratchet leftovers who have their ex-baby daddy's initials tattooed on their fingers. And their ex-baby daddy happens to be a goon. Don't do it. You deserve the cream of the crop. Russell is setting a terrible example. So we're supposed to assume that the nice corporate square is this Russell, and let me get it right here, Shaquita. The hood leftovers. Ciara is the hood leftovers. So what are your thoughts?
Well, I mean, the fact that, people highlight Ayesha Curry, I think is great, because I do think that we do need a new standard for femininity and womanhood in the Black community. And I think Ayesha Curry is a great example. I mean, I really focus on my thoughts related to the Black community as a collective, what's best for us as far as building a family. So, yeah, I think that's great. But at the same time, there's a great example and standard, and then there's a practical example and standard. I mean, Russell and Ciara have both been in relationships. Russell Wilson was married before to a white woman. They're both rich, so they bring their own money to the table. Neither one of them are virgins. So I think if they're trying to do something together that's positive in the Black community, then that's a good thing. I mean, why should I criticize them?
Well, I don't know much about either of these two, but I'll tell you what I saw from a distance. When this couple came into the public scene as a couple, it appeared to me as if it was being implied that Ciara had more experience, she was older, and she had been around the block a few more times than him. That was the implication. Now, we, of course, know with media and celebrities and so forth, anything that's put out there isn't necessarily true. So what I am seeing, and it's consistent with what I always see, is that society seems to be much more comfortable with a man who's been around the block a few times, but not with a woman who's been around the block a few times.
Yeah, okay, go ahead.
So one more point. So the reality is, that's the society we live in, whether you like it or not. And I think you and I have had conversations about this before. It may not be fair, it may not be right, but it is what it is. Okay. If a man decides to sleep with a whole bunch of women, he can do that. To me personally, it's just as disgusting as when a woman does it, because the likelihood of you catching diseases and getting intertwined with all kinds of different spirits and things, whether you're a man or a woman, is happening. However, it doesn't change the fact that in the society that we live in right now, people find it more acceptable for a man to sow his oats or whatever it is, and then eventually settle down with a nice, clean girl. And by clean, we mean she hasn't been around the block. Not my words, okay? So you can keep your comments. But not you, Shaquita, but, our audience sometimes takes things that we say out of context. But my point, though, is that it is what it is. And we're just seeing what has always been there. People are more willing to accept a man being promiscuous or having a past that's more colorful than the woman that he's with. To me, it doesn't surprise me. And I think it's not fair, but the fact is that it is what it is.
I think that the guy who wrote the Facebook and people who are coming from his perspective, they have somewhat of a point, because we do have a culture right now that's been pushed upon Black society through propaganda that it's okay for women to just be very just flagrant with their sexuality, or to just not really guard and protect their sexuality. And I think that that's a mistake for a woman. And I'm not judging women, because I think my thing is that we're all flawed human beings, man or woman, in the Black community. And how do we rebuild in this scenario? Some people, like Ciara, like Russell, they've had past relationships. Now they want to try to turn it around and build with one another. And if that includes her child from a previous marriage, and they are willing to work through that, then that's a good thing, because we have probably 95% of the population who have kids out of wedlock, who are having sex before marriage. And so what do we say to those people? Even though I might agree that, like, for my sons, I would want them to get married maybe at a younger age after they get their education and financial status, and marry someone who is virgin-esque, if not a virgin. But at the same time, there are situations where people make mistakes. All lives have mistakes in them. So I think in the Black community, yes, we should change our standard on womanhood, but at the same time, we should be offering an access for people to make changes in their life if that's what they've decided, if they feel like they've made mistakes and want to go a different route.
I hear what you're saying, but I want to clarify that there's a difference between walking with a cup of water and spilling it. Okay, that's a mistake. Mm-hmm. Sleeping around and having 4 or 5 or however many different men fathering your children, or even if they're not fathering your children, if you're using protection and you happen not to be getting pregnant, but you're abusing yourself, abusing your body, abusing your spirit, that's detrimental. That's dysfunctional. And it will destroy you. So that's not a mistake. That's a pattern, a terrible pattern. Now, of course, there's many, many implications, and there's reasons, and it's political, and it's historical. There's a lot that I won't get into, okay? But we can't accept it and call it a mistake. It's not a mistake. It's something that can destroy you. So I'm not, once again, in the same way you said it, you're not trying to judge anybody, but we can't just accept everything and keep saying, oh, we're flawed and this is a mistake and so forth. I've never jumped on that bandwagon. I personally have my own past. I think you have yours. Everybody has a past, okay? But I think that there's a difference between accepting that, we've made bad choices, or maybe not calling them bad choices and just saying these are the choices that I wanted to make, these are the morals that I uphold, and so forth. However, I think that there has to be a distinction between making mistakes and setting up bad patterns that are going to destroy our lives. And in my opinion, if you're extremely promiscuous and you want to try and pass that off as normal or good or whatever it is, that's a destructive pattern. And whether people like hearing it or not, and, I've had a past in the past few years as a commentator, social commentator, of being thrown to the wolves for bringing this up. But that's not okay, okay? That is part of what is wrong sometimes with poverty. If you look at it and you study it and what's happening, usually it's because people are having children that they can't afford, okay? Then they end up not being able to feed them and so forth. Now, again, there are other implications, okay? Especially in this country. In the United States, there are other implications. There are other reasons why people end up in those situations or why they have those patterns. But the fact that there's a reason for something, or that we can see how it happened, doesn't mean that we should continue to accept it. It's not okay. Now, back to Ciara and her fiancé. I think that if he chose her, he probably knew about her past, whatever past people are so angry about. I think if he chose her, he knew about it and he's accepted it. So the rest of us, really don't matter. What we have to say really doesn't matter. But the other point that I wanted to make was, I noticed that he talked about women going for bad boys and coons and thugs and so on. And again, that's another destructive pattern. And in a sense, he's making good points. I just don't like his tone. I don't like the way that he comes off as attacking women and using words like hoes and thugs and all this other stuff, because it comes off as somebody who doesn't really care about the people he's talking about. However, we can't ignore entirely and just block out what is being said. There's a saying, you don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. Some of what he's saying lacks tact, it's unkind, it's brutal, and so forth, but we can't ignore all of it, in my opinion. So I know I've talked for a long time and barely breathed and given you a chance to. It's just that this is a topic that, I've talked. Yeah. I remember having a conversation with Dr. Boyce Watkins about women who continue to complain about men treating them badly, but they seem to consistently choose men who are, seen as thugs or whatever it is. And they overlook the nice guys because they say they're boring or they're dull or they're nerds or whatever it is. So that does exist, and we can't pretend like it doesn't exist. And maybe then down the line, when a woman's older and she's kind of running out of options, then she starts looking for the nerd. That's a real thing that happens. But again, what I'm saying is I can't jump on the bandwagon that this guy is on and start attacking people and being unkind and brutal and saying horrible things and calling women hoes and what was it, a hood leftovers and things like that. Yeah. Yeah. Mm-hmm. I want to be clear that I don't agree with the way that he's characterizing either Ciara or anybody else who has maybe the same behavior pattern, but we can't ignore some of the facts that come with, or that he's extrapolating. What do you think?
Okay. So, again, I'm of the school of like Dr. Frances Cress Wells, and she said that if she had it her way, Black people would not play with sex. They would obtain a meaningful education, financial status before they get in a serious relationship. They would only have children in a stable relationship like a marriage. I totally agree with all of that. At the same time, if a young girl, she ended up getting pregnant out of wedlock, 19, 20, or she was making some bad decisions, I wouldn't say to her, you're a effing hood rat. There's nobody who would want you or who should want you. If a young man came to me and said, listen, I've got this girl, me and her, we have a vision of a future together. However, she's done this, I've done this. Does that mean not to choose this person? Now, it's a difference between, like you're saying, like a determined behavior pattern, a character flaw that is within you that you are unwilling to shake off. Right. But we learn from our mistakes. Right. So people make mistakes and they learn from them, and they can be one person at one point in their lives and turn into another person. And I could argue that those are the people you can see with the most character, because they are humble and they've been through things, where you have some people who have always been quote unquote perfect and even Christian, and they're the most evil, wicked, horrible people, judgmental people to be around. They are like a pariah to humanity. It's like they don't see the humanity in anybody. They have no mercy for anyone. And that kind of goes back to what you're saying about this man's comments, because at the end of the day, God put you on a team. He put you with a black woman and a black man if you're in the black community. So why tear down the black woman? Why tear down the black man? Yes, everybody's making mistakes, but we tend to go ahead and pit ourselves one against the other instead of trying to figure out how do we deal with these things.
I agree, and that's a good note to end on. I want to remind our audience that, one of your platforms is lovingtheblackman.com, so you're right on message in the sense that, as a black woman, you believe that it's important to highlight the good men that we have in our community, and to focus on the good that you see in other people, especially men, especially black men if you're a black woman. But, of course, this could, like many of our conversations, this could go on and on and on and on and on. I want to remind our readers that this is Shaquita Graham, again, with lovingtheblackman.com and atechco.com. I am Nomalanga Mhlauli-Moses with healthyblackwoman.com. And, of course, this has been a segment of Your Black Women, where black women keep it real. Thank you, Shaquita, and thanks, guys, for watching.
Thank you, Noma. Thanks for watching.